Welcome to Deal Closers with Anette, Talie, where we focus on the deals. Our guests are real estate closers who will share in detail the whole process from finding a deal to closing it, as well as strategies and tips to help you do the same. Here is your host, Anette, Talie.
Welcome to another episode of Deal Closers. I am your host, Anette, Talie, and today my guest is my friend, Jamie Gruber. Welcome, Jamie.
Thank you. So glad to be here. Thank you, Annette.
No, I am so glad to have you on the show. Let me tell you a little bit about Jamie. He is an experienced real estate investor and insurance executive currently residing in southeastern Michigan. His current portfolio consists of 20 multifamily units with 22 more to close early 2020. Congrats.
Thank you. Thank you.
He is the co-founder of Multifamily and More, family of networking communities with 11 chapters across the U.S. and over 4,000 members. He hosts the Multifamily and More virtual mastermind and considers networking essential to success in real estate. Jamie is married to Sylvia since 2010, and he is proud father of two boys, Sebastian and Julian.
Julian, yes. That's them. That's them.
Yeah, welcome, my friend. So tell me a little bit, how did you get into real estate?
Sure. I will say this before we get started. I got to update the bio because we're over 5,000 members, thanks in large part to you, and over 12 chapters. So you have like a couple thousand members now in the South Florida group. So you're a badass. How did I get into real estate? Accidentally. So in 2005, I was 20 something, six, I don't know. And like everybody, I was convinced that I should just buy a house, right? I had my job at the time. I had a girlfriend, had the car, and the next thing you do is you buy a house. I lived in upstate New York at the time, and I remember getting on the phone with the mortgage broker, and he said, "Yeah, hey, listen, we'll do 20% down with a home equity line, and then we're going to do or home equity loan, and then we're going to do the rest of it with a regular mortgage, so you avoid PMI." And I was like, cool, sure. I didn't know what PMI was. I had no idea what he was talking about, but all I knew was I was going to get the house. I had to do almost nothing to get it, like most people did in 2005. And I bought myself a house for $142,000. I lived in it for a couple of years. Around 2008, actually late 2008, I took a position with my same company in Boston and had to move. And I don't know if you caught that, but this was late 2008. So I could not sell the property, even having a loss on sale clause in my relocation agreement with my company of $25,000. Meaning I could sell it for $25,000 less than I bought it for, still couldn't sell the house. So I kept it. I held on to it. And I was a landlord for a number of years. And that's how I with that house before kind of getting a little bit more. It was like I didn't want to be a landlord, but I was. And then later I decided I wanted to get into it a little bit more. But that's how I got the start.
Wow. Accidentally.
Accidental landlord. Yeah. And it's funny because I didn't appreciate real estate for what it was. When I owned that house, I looked at that thing as a burden and albatross. It was literally 6 hours away from where I was moving to, right? So it was 6 hours west of where I moved to in Boston. And yeah, I had friends and stuff in the area, and rents were good, and the place was fine. But to me, it was this big burden until, years later, I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, honestly, for the second time, but kind of got it and thought, oh, this is an asset. Let me do something with it. Let me make it an asset. And, off we went.
Awesome.
The Deal.
All right. So what deal are we going to talk about today? Tell me about your deal.
We are going to talk about, I struggle with this, but I thought I would go to two Brrrs that I actually recently completed the exit on, or the Brrrr, the last R, whatever the heck it is. Actually, I didn't repeat. So the Refinance R, whatever that one is in the Brrrr strategy. So I thought I'd dive into these two duplexes, if that's cool with you.
Awesome. And then for the people that don't know what the Brrrr is, can you explain?
I can. I think this phrase was coined by a guy named Brandon Turner with Bigger Pockets, and it's where you buy. So imagine BRRRR. It's you buy, you rehab, you rent it out, you refinance it after you do that, and then you repeat it. So you're essentially flipping to hold. Like everybody knows what flipping is. You buy it, you fix it up, and then you sell it. Well, you buy it, you fix it up, you put a renter in it, and then you go back to the bank and refinance it at the higher value and get all your money back out of it essentially, but keep it. So that's what a BRRRR is.
Awesome. Yeah, I think I was doing it also before I knew what BRRRR was.
Right. Yes, it's just that he coined the phrase, but the strategy's been around for a long time.
Exactly. All right. So where is it located?
So these two duplexes are located in upstate New York in a town called Oneonta. For those that have any familiarity, it's a pretty decent sized college town in upstate New York. So my family lives not far from there. As in my bio, as you noted, I live in Michigan now. But I grew up there essentially. After growing up on Long Island, my family moved to this town, and they still live there now.
Okay. Were they bought together, or were they like separate just at the same time?
So it's interesting when my wife and I, as I mentioned, kind of like, hey, I reread Rich Dad and said, wow, all right, that house, that one single family, we refinance that to make the terms better. We just sort of mentally and financially converted it to an asset, right? That's an asset that we have now. Then we decided we're going to buy two more, and we're looking all around Boston. And like you in South Florida, Boston's just like a hot market. Very, very expensive. There are a couple towns you can get into, but boy, you're just getting into like, very, very difficult tenants, I guess you could say, if you buy in those towns. So I thought, wow, let's look at my town, like where I grew up, right? Let's take a peek at that. And there were 4 distressed duplexes on the market. They were all like a wreck, and they were expensive for what I thought they should be, but they were all like gross. And I remember looking at all 4 of them, like, well, any one of these 4, these are interesting. They all had the same agent listing them as well. So I'm thinking, oh, maybe she's investor friendly or whatever. Well, it turns out all 4 were owned by the same guy. So the same owner had all 4. He lived in downstate New York, so like New York City area, and moved to Florida. And he had a property manager managing the properties for him. But like I remember one of them, when we walked up to it, there was like a piece of siding missing. It was like it's an old like asbestos siding. It looked like an asbestos, like kind of, I don't know, a weird looking siding. It wasn't like your vinyl or anything like that. And the siding was missing, and it was almost like he went up to it. He looked at the size of the hole. He had a piece of siding. He like snapped it in half and like stuck it in there. Like it was just terribly maintained, all of the properties. So I looked at all 4 and actually went under contract on all 4. Made an offer. I don't remember what that offer was, or how much it was, or how much the total of the 4 were even going for, but made an offer on all 4. Then we did our inspections, and 2 of them were just a little too much. Like half of one house had to be literally taken down. The other house's foundation was sinking. It needed like a whole re-engineering to do it. It was like, those are a little over the top. So I got out of the contract, and the owner asked if I wanted any of them. I said, yeah, these 2 I like. And we ended up going under contract on those.
Right. So how did you find them? Were they on the market, or were
you? They were just MLS. I literally like pulled them up. There it was. It was like, I wish I had this whole detailed story of like how I hunted for them or whatever, but it was like, can't find Massachusetts, look in this town of Oneonta. There they are. And then we bought them a few months later.
And how long were they on the market?
They were on for a while, probably a year or more. They were on and they didn't really move in price. Like they maybe $5,000 or $10,000 each. They didn't move a lot.
Right. Yeah. And probably that's why they were on the market for a long time. The guy was ready to sell.
You got it.
Yeah.
You got it.
All right. So what was the listing price for the 2 that you end up acquiring?
Yeah. So the 2 combined were $240. It was $135 for one of them and $105 for the other. They're both duplexes, upstairs, downstairs. They're 2-bed, 1-bath for 3 of the 4. The 4th one technically is 3-bed, 1-bath. It's a small 3rd bedroom, but it's a 3rd bedroom. So $240 for the group, for the 2.
And they were not occupied, I'm assuming.
No, they were. They're fully tenanted. Yeah.
Oh, and what was the rents at that time? So
the rents on the downstairs 3-bedroom on the one property was $755, and the rent upstairs for the 2-bedroom was $550, I think it was. On the other property, it was $800 upstairs and downstairs with all utilities included, which in the winter in New York is a lot of money. So.
Yeah, for the utilities, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so what price did you end up getting both buildings, and how did you negotiate it?
Sure. So $240 was the ask price. We ended up getting them for $170. So about $70,000 off. Yeah. And what's funny is I made an offer at 160, I think it was. Just, I went through the calculators that I had at the time and kind of figured out what I thought the rehab was going to be, and said, yeah, I could do it at 160. And I remember saying to my wife, man, he comes to 180. I'm going to buy this. So the next offer he made was 175. It might not have been from 240 down. It might have been a little bit in there, but he came down to like the next one it went past my high, which was 180. He went down below it to 175. So I said, you know what? Let me come back and try like 168 or something like that. And he came down to 170. So I remember thinking like, don't react. Don't just buy it. Like I got an extra $5,000 off it at the end. So it was a desperate seller, and we caught him at the right time, to be honest with you.
Right. But this was before the inspections?
This was before. Actually, we ended up waiving the inspections. That was another contingency we put in there, another negotiation point. Like I went through these houses, like I knew what was wrong with them. I'll get to the cost of that and whether or not I estimated the costs appropriately, because I didn't. But but I knew what was wrong. There was no surprise as to what they needed. They needed a lot of stuff. Excuse me. But so we waived inspections as part of the agreement on this. Like, hey, listen, I'll do it for this and no inspections, and that kind of did the deal.
Okay, yeah. So that is a technique that I use as well. I don't know if you were experienced at the time, but if you are experienced and you know what the repairs are going to be, and you're comfortable with it, to get the deal, you can just offer with no contingencies for inspections.
Yeah.
You can still have your, you probably were a cash, but you can still, if you're buying it finance, you can still have those contingencies and then just waive the inspection period. But that's only if you are experienced and you know what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And we didn't buy it cash. I'll get into the financing. We actually financed these, but no, I completely agree. In our case, like experience is a bit of a reach. We had the one property. So we had over the years, I had learned a little bit about what this takes, what that takes, but didn't appreciate that different markets are priced differently. Even though I thought these markets where I had the single family and where I was buying the duplexes are similar, the cost of labor is markedly different between the two. And that I didn't factor that in. But my father and a friend of ours who were very experienced with this stuff, my father's owned a bunch of property in the past, they helped us with that. They walked the properties, and it was like, not just me going like, yeah, I know what's going on here. Like at the very least, I mean, they didn't estimate damages for us, but they at least went around and said, yeah, this. And we knew what needed to be done. And then, it was on us to figure out how much that would cost.
Right. Were you dealing directly with the owner, or were you going through a realtor? Through
an agent. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. It was like buying a house you're going to live in. It was, the same experience. So yeah.
Okay, cool. All right. So how did you finance it?
So we ended up, we were looking at a lot of different things. Like, do we put a bunch of cash down? Do we do a hard money loan or private money? What do we do here? We ended up calling a bunch of banks to get an idea of like, what would terms be? Like, what kind of financing can we get? And we ended up, after like the 12th call to a bank, we found a local community bank that offered a portfolio product, a portfolio mortgage. And what that means essentially is most mortgages are Fannie or Freddie backed, meaning a bank's goal is they don't have a war chest of cash. So they're going to, put the mortgage out there. They're going to give you the mortgage and then immediately sell it to Fannie or Freddie. So in order to do that, they're going to abide by Fannie and Freddie guidelines for the entirety of the financing. So that means, if Fannie and Freddie say you need to put 25% down on a rental property, then you're putting 25% down in order for that bank to finance it. They're not going to go outside of Fannie and Freddie guidelines. Closing costs can be a little bit elevated as well. We found a community bank that offered a portfolio loan, which means they'll do the mortgage and they're not going to sell it to Fannie or Freddie. So they have a little bit more flexibility in the terms that they're able to give you. So we financed it with them. I believe it was for 5%, or maybe it was 4.75%. A 30-year mortgage, 20% down, and the closing costs were negligible. They were like $2,000-3,000. So that compared to doing hard money or something like that was just a way cheaper option. And they had no seasoning period for refinance, right? Yeah. Now we blew right past whatever a seasoning period would be, but if we were able to like flip them quick, there was no seasoning period. They would just go with whatever market value was based on the rehab. So.
Right. So the seasoning period is the 6 months normally that you have to wait before you can refinance the property, correct?
Yeah. Some are a year. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. You know, I haven't, at least in South Florida, found a place that does it for 20%. So that's awesome. I always have to do 25%.
Yeah, it took a lot of calls. Everyone was 25%. I mean, it was like hearing the same thing. I remember I created a spreadsheet and just went through the terms. There were some differences between them depending on, like, some didn't want to do student housing because it's a college town and these are not college rentals. And there were a couple of banks that had that term. So I was like, okay, that's good to know. But it took like the 12th call, and this isn't a big area. I mean, there were that many banks that I could get in touch with. Took the 12th call, say, well, actually, we do offer a portfolio product that we could do 80/20. I'm like, wow. And I actually found that in Massachusetts as well with a bank. So if you're pounding the pavement and looking at, you can find them. Maybe a broker is the best way to go. I don't know.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah. And you know, it took you 12 calls. So maybe I need
Yeah.
to do some extra calls for the next one.
Perhaps. Yep, exactly.
Okay. So those were the terms. And, you know, you said that it needed a lot of repairs. They were willing to finance it, being that it wasn't in very good condition.
Yeah, they were livable, but you know, there was no there were no foundation issues. There was nothing like that. They were willing to finance because they were livable. They just needed, I mean, you know, we thought painted, like the siding needed to be painted, scraped and painted on one. You know, the units needed to be updated in order to split the utilities. We would need to install, you know, a separate service for the electric. Like there was no rubs on these or anything like that. So, you know, like when I say work, they needed a lot of stuff to get them up to speed. You know, the units needed to be updated, kitchens, baths, but they were functional. Does that make sense? Like,
Yes.
it was like, in order for, when I say needed to be, in order for us to attract the rents we wanted to attract and the type of tenant we wanted to attract, they needed stuff. If we wanted to just keep the people that we had in there or toss some new people like that in there, then we could have done nothing with it. But, you know, they were just in disrepair. They were like, well, one porch was falling down on the side of one of the houses, so that had to be done. I mean, there was work to be done in both properties.
Okay, excellent. So tell us about your budget. You said that you miscalculated some stuff.
Oh yeah, no, a lot of stuff. Are you kidding me? So like I said, we thought we would have to paint the siding. Well, it turns out the siding was essentially rotted. It was wood siding. So we needed to side the building. So we could have like fixed some of the rot and painted, but it would have been more than just siding the damn building. So it goes from like a $5,000 paint job to like a $15,000 siding job, right? Some of the windows, like just based on the code. So the town's code office, zoning office, whatever, code office is like so aggressive. They have a lot of people that invest from out of state, and they seem to latch on to those owners as a way to kind of like just berate them, fine them, do whatever they can. So like the windows, we didn't anticipate. We needed to replace windows on both houses. That was like $6,000 each that we did not have in our budget because we're thinking, the windows are windows. We discovered one of the what's the word? The bay window had like a roof over it that it ended up being like waterlogged underneath. We didn't see that on the initial walkthrough. I mean, I don't know how we could have. I don't even think an inspector would have caught it. So, you know, there's some stuff there. So we went in with a budget of like 30 to 35, and we left spending somewhere in the $65,000 range. So it was literally
Twice.
double. So to give you an idea, I mean, I can give you kind of how I was thinking this would flesh out from an ARV and everything perspective, and then how it actually did, if you'd like.
Yes, please.
Okay. So I bought them for $170. I was anticipating about $30,000, right? So say $200,000 all in ish, right in that ballpark. My after repair value, I thought at the time, was going to be north of 260. I thought 260 was my low, but I thought I can get north of 260. But even at 260, in my worst case, at 80/20 financing with that same bank, I'd have debt of $208,000. So they'd give me $208,000 to pay off the mortgages and the rehab, and that's $200,000. So I'd have an $8,000 return to me, and look at me, I'm cash flowing with $8,000 in pocket, all my money back. Which, by the way, we did take out just a private loan from our parents to do the rehab. So pay that back, pay all this stuff back, right? And you know, we're good to go. The actuality is I wasn't far off. I wasn't terribly far off on the ARV, but I was off. The actuality was we were in at a 170. We put, 65 in it or so. So like, we're like 2 something, 235, 230, something in that range. We got a $260,000 valuation, and maybe I'm a little high there, but we ended up spending about $2,000 to $3,000 at the closing table. My numbers might be off a little bit, but we ended up having to put $3,000 into it at the end, as opposed to taking $8,000 out of it. So, yeah, we definitely miscalculated the.
But then you still had to pay the private money, right?
We paid everything off. Yep,
Oh.
we paid the 2 mortgages. We paid the private money off, and we had to take a little bit of our own money to put it in at the end to be done with it. But that we ended up being a little bit off. Oh, the ARV was 250, not 260, as I thought it was going to be.
But you did put a 20%.
20% down, correct?
20%, and then you put 3,000 more.
Correct.
So you
well, the 20% I got essentially back, right, at closing. I got that essentially came back, but then I had to put in an extra $3,000, I guess is the best way to put it, at closing.
Okay, got you. I mean, but it's just, now you have 2 cash flowing properties and you have only $3,000 in.
Correct.
You're getting the cash flow.
Yeah, cash flow is about $6,000 a year or so, $5,000 to $6,000 a year, depending on if we go vacant at any point. And for $3,000, call it in $2,000 to $3,000 in, we're making a 200% return.
You recovered that though.
I'm sorry?
You just recovered that in 6 months.
That's it. Right. So it's not bad, but it's like way off of what I thought. And there's still some stuff that we have to here's and there's that we have to still take care of. So it's not like it's, completely done. And, there's some landscaping stuff, some shale in a driveway, like that kind of stuff that we still have to do. But, hopefully we can do that with our reserves that we've created. So,
but it was probably like a really good experience when you got all these like next time I'm not going to make this mistake.
Exactly. And there's a few I'll talk about here in a second, but yeah, no doubt. The idea that, we can sort of eyeball and say, well, based on my experience over there, it costs, this much to paint a house. So it cost me $5,000 to paint my single family house. Right. So I'm like, well, this is even smaller than that house. It's going to cost $5,000. But what I didn't account for was just the type of house, right? Like the house I had as a single family was more kind of ranch style. So it wasn't that tall. Whereas this was like a tall Victorian. So they have to put scaffolding up and, there's a lot more cost there. And then again, I looked at like paint this, paint that without considering, well, but the wood here was okay. The wood here was not okay. So like things like that, where I looked at it and did my estimates based on what I thought I knew, that came back to bite me a bit.
Awesome. So make sure that you take that into consideration. And the easiest way is to go in with a contractor, maybe, if you don't feel comfortable doing that, then bring a contractor. What I always do, even if I know how much for the roofs, because here in South Florida, roofs are very expensive. So every property that I'm going to offer on, I send my roofer and I ask him for a real price. Just give me a real price for the roof. The last roof I replaced was like $15,000.
Crazy.
So it's just very expensive here in South Florida for roofs. So
crazy. Yeah. I relied a little too much on what I thought my knowledge was. And also just the good old boy network that, I thought was there with my family being there and me being from there, whatever. Like, oh, I know this guy, he does siding. It won't be a problem. He did this house over there for this much. Like there was logic to it, but it wasn't clear that, this was going to cost X until we really got into it.
Yeah. Awesome.
Expert tips.
All right. So now we're going to talk about the 3 expert tips that you're going to share with us. And you're going to share with us 3 tips on your first BRRRR.
Yeah. So the first thing I would say is you got to do one. I mean, I get on the soapbox from time to time about, people listen to podcasts all the time, which is great. I do too, on how to invest in property, and they hear speakers like Bigger Pockets is a great podcast, right? And when I first discovered it, like a lot of people, you hear that first episode, whatever the most recent one is for when you discover them, and then you want to go back to the beginning and listen to every episode ever because you're so enthralled by all of this stuff. And what you hear is a lot of people talking about the mistakes they made, the errors they made, the whatever, the things that blew up in their face, and you're kind of taking notes like, okay, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. And to me, you get into a place where you just got like all these things swirling around you that you can kill any deal with. Like, I mean, the commonality with every one of those people on that podcast, with me, maybe with you, Annette, is that in order for us to tell you how not, what mistakes what mistakes we made. We had to do a deal, right? You have to do a deal. So I'm not saying just go out blindly and buy a property, not at all, but go look at something, do the due diligence to the best of your ability, and if it makes some sense, if it makes sense to you, buy it. It's the only way you're going to truly learn, in my opinion, what to do, what not to do, so on and so forth. You just got to be involved. You got to get in the game. So tip 1, do a deal.
Do it.
Do it. Do it. The other 2 tips are a little bit more tactical, I guess. So one is, and you may have figured this out from my presentation so far here, is get detailed estimates from contractors. So obvious. Like I sit here saying it like red face, like duh. Like I could have told you that from episode 2 of a Bigger Pockets podcast, right? But in the moment, at least there was a lot of like, okay, I know this, I know that, we can do this, we can do that. Can't be more than this because of this. It wasn't like we were just like, whatever, that we had an outline, we had a budget, we had what we thought was a reasonable cost. We even talked to some people that were in the industry that gave us a sense of it. So we felt like, we were validated. Like, I think that's going to cost about $5,000. Hey, Tony, can I talk to your brother? Cause he does this stuff. Like, yeah. He said those cost about $5,000. Okay. 5,000 is reasonable, right? As opposed to getting somebody out there. We just struggled to get somebody to come, and we went forward thinking we knew what we knew. So get detailed.
It's hard to get somebody there when you don't own it yet.
Correct.
They don't want to spend their time, waste their time, basically. But once you've done it a couple of times and people know that you do it, like my roofer, he will go to any property even if he knows that I don't own it, because he knows that maybe out of 3 I will buy one.
Right.
So they, once they know you, then you create this team of people that will do it for you.
100%. So that was, we just sort of shortcutted it and thought, we got enough to say that we were pretty close. We might be a little off, but again, we were way off. So that's tip 2. Tip 3 is snake your sewer line. Like get a camera down your sewer line. So we learned this lesson the hard way. And
what did you find in that sewer line that you have to get a camera out?
It's separated. So the sewer line is broken in half, essentially, about, a few feet from the street. And I've had a sewer line go before. So again, I have the experience of this. And a couple of things to note is most municipalities, like, you own it right up to the main, right? So the main runs right in the middle of the street. You could have a break underneath the road within 2 inches of the main on the pipe. It's yours. That means if they have to crack the street open, break the sidewalk, pour new sidewalk, and put a new line in there, that's all on you to pay for. No insurance is going to cover that, right? So, again, it was an expensive lesson for us to learn. It was in that budget I mentioned of costs that we had overrun on. We didn't account for it, and within a couple of months we had maybe the first month, the tenants telling us, the toilet's overflowing again. Like, what do you mean again? Like, oh yeah, this has been happening. It's like,
that's one of the things that I thought when I go in to look at the apartments.
Yep.
A lot of people, they are friendly, like the tenants. So I ask, like, so what's wrong with the place? Like, any problems that need to be fixed? And they tell me the whole thing.
Sure.
Many times it's like, the toilets don't flush, but they just came and cleaned the septic. Like last week again, they do it like once a week, and then you learn all these problems. So talk to the tenants, like, just be friendly, and and they will give you a lot of information.
Absolutely. One thing I should say, by the way, on this story, just to give you a nice silver lining, I mentioned earlier that the rents were $755 for the 3-bed and $550, I think, for the 2-bed upstairs on the one property. That went from $755 to $1,200.
Wow.
And actually, that tenant just moved out, and we're re-renting it for $1,300. And the upstairs went from $550 to $900. On the other property, it was $800 upstairs and downstairs with utilities included, meaning I paid them. The utilities are separated out now, and we're getting $850. So it's about $50 more on the actual rent, but $200 a month or so for each unit are not being paid by me anymore. So there's a $250 increase on each of those units as well. So on that end, we actually did better than we expected. So we were conservative on our rents, but we did pretty well with it.
Yeah, it's really excellent, those numbers for rent.
Yeah, good jumps.
Yeah.
So those are my 3 tips. Do a deal, get detailed estimates, look in your sewer line. Don't assume, or like you said, talk to tenants and ask them. But
That
plumbing is important to know.
excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much for being in the show and adding so much value. And I have to say, you are the one who encouraged me to have the podcast and do this video. So thank you very much. A year ago, somebody asked me, are you going to be doing this? And I was like, no way. Like, I don't think so. And
Here you are.
Here I am. So thank you for that encouragement and that you always give me.
Of course. No, I love it. I love seeing what you're doing. So it's awesome. And you're a natural at it. Can I tell a quick story before we go?
Yes.
So Annette was not a fan of like Facebook Live or anything like that. So I said to her, you should just do it. Just do it once. She was back and forth with me on the phone. Like, oh, do I say this? Do I do that? I'm like, just do one. Right. So she does one. She's all nervous and, whatever. Flash forward 6 months. I'm at a conference with her in Orlando. And I see her out in like the common area, like snagging all the big name guys that are at this conference. Like, listen, like you come over here with me. She had like a stand with her phone, like lighting the whole nine. She's going live with these guys, asking them 3 questions, do that like a beast with live. So a little bit of an animal has been uncaged here when it comes to social media. And no, it's been pretty impressive to see you do what you're doing. So I had to tell that story. I thought that was hilarious.
Thank you.
Of course.
So tell me, where can people find you?
Absolutely. So the brand Multifamily and More, you can find us anywhere by just putting at Multifamily and More. Would love for you to subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is simply youtube.com/multifamily and more. Me personally, you can find me on Facebook or any of the other platforms as at the Jamie Gruber. I know that sounds pretentious, but it's the only one that was available across all platforms. So THE Jamie Gruber. You can find me on any of those.
Awesome. And if you don't know, I am the leader of the South Florida Multifamily and More Facebook group and meetup, and that's how we met.
That's right. That's right. I lead the Michigan group, and my partner Ben and I kind of founded the brand, and Annette has taken the South Florida group to stratospheric levels. I'm embarrassed to say you have the biggest group of all of us, so I gotta level up.
I just love how Ben always is like, Florida is the biggest.
Always prodding.
Yes. All right, Jamie. Thank you so much for being with me today and for adding so much value. I think people are gonna, this episode is gonna be awesome for people that are trying to start, and these are lessons that they need. Thank you.
Yeah. No, I appreciate it. Thank you. Great to be here.
All right. Bye, guys.
This was Deal Closers with Anette Talie, brought to you by Talie Investments. We hope that you enjoyed this episode. Our goal is to provide amazing value on your real estate journey. Connect online at www.talieinvestments.com, where you can find this episode and more. Did you like this episode? Subscribe, like, and share.